It's called A Little of What You Fancy. You know it. Hooray! I was working in the cake shop in the centre of the town, 'cause a little of what you fancy does you good, de-o-do-lo-do. Eating cakes and buns all day, my belly got fat and round, 'cause a little of what you fancy does you good. A little what you fancy, little what you fancy, boys. A little of what you fancy does you good, de-o-do-lo-do. A little what you fancy, that's right, little what you fancy, girls. A little of what you fancy does you good, that's it. I went to Shepton, Mallet, to the Art Bank Cafe, 'cause a little of what you fancy does you good, de-o-do-lo-do. They have live music and I like to see them play, 'cause a little of what you fancy does you good. Are you ready now? A little what you fancy, little what you fancy, boys. A little of what you fancy does you good, de-o-do-lo-do. Little what you fancy, little what you fancy, girls. A little of what you fancy does you good. Well, it was Friday folk, so I thought I'd sing this song, 'cause a little of what you fancy does you good, de-o-do-lo-do. There were lots of people here, and some of them sang along. Come on then, 'cause a little of what you fancy does you good. Let's hear ya. A little what you fancy, little what you fancy, boys. A little of what you fancy does you good, de-o-do-lo-do. Little what you fancy, little what you fancy, girls. A little of what you fancy does you good. A little what you fancy, little what you fancy, boys. A little of what you fancy does you good. Last time now, little what you fancy, little what you fancy, girls. A little of what you fancy does you good. Good old Shag.
Hey,
thank you very much.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, cousins, brothers, twins.